Okay, what's up? This is part 2 of After Socrates, and we are ex-Mormons and Mormons reviewing if that framework is going to work out for us. I mean, I guess that's sort of what we're doing. We're just kind of checking it out and giving thoughts on what we think about it. We're not trying to be major super philosophical critics. Some of that might come out, but it's really kind of just reviewing it as people who might or might not still have church. Connie's new here. I don't know exactly what her situation is. Marty, Seth, and I, and Christopher, who's going to show up, are all ex-Mormons and maybe a little wayward, although all of us kind of have our own ways of making meaning in our meaning crisis, to use the Vervaeke term. And I don't know that any of us feels that wayward, but we're also just kind of examining this to see if it's something that might help unify groups, even if we feel fine individually or anything like that. And if it's some sort of sign or some direction forward. I listened to Vervaeke on a couple podcasts separate from this week talk about his vision for it. And part of his vision for it is that it could be unifying, or that we had different philosophies for revolutions in the past, like industrial revolution and those sorts of things. But this is a revolution for now, because we don't really have anything right now for going forward in this new digital age, or whatever you might call it. But anything we want to get saying? Should I go around the horn here? Just say we've got Marty, Marty from Mormon Discussions. And you had anything released lately, or nothing this last week or two?
I am behind. I'm sitting on a couple of recordings, and I haven't had a lot of time. And the time that I do have, I don't use it for that.
Well, I wanted to get to these faster, but man, I got busy in February. And even if I wasn't busy, snow made me 3 times as busy because I couldn't get anywhere fast enough. I've just been stuck in the snow everywhere, back and forth every day. I don't know if it's been affecting your guys' lives, or if you're...
I'm in Orange County, California. So
so jealous.
Come see me sometime.
Seth's down in Arizona.
Yeah.
I'm so jealous. Snow has been so bad this year. You can't even believe it.
Most of my family's in Orem, so I hear you.
But,
so Connie,
what's your story? How would you like to frame what got you into
religion? That's a good question. Lifelong member of the church, still trying to figure things out,
I born and raised in California, or
born and raised in Long Beach, California. Married 30 years, 4 kids, 25 down to 19. 3 of my 4 have left the church, which is kind of what got me going down this whole path of exploring. John Dillon kept popping up, and I finally just, I hate that phrase, breaking the shelf, but I just checked it out one day, and that kind of sent me down the rabbit hole, and eventually led me to Marty, which led me to you, which led me here I am. So,
awesome.
Yeah, I'm a work in special ed. So
nice.
I work at the high school across the street with special ed kids, special ed high schoolers. So that's my day job. Keeps me busy. So.
I bet it is.
Yeah.
Seth, Transcendent Philosophy.
Yeah.
How's that coming?
It's been going pretty good. I just recently put out a video that goes through my blog on the is-ought gap, the Humean problem in philosophy,
which comes up today.
Yeah, so I got lots of thoughts on that, and
it snuck in there. Like when you mentioned it to me just yesterday, I was like, "Wait a minute!" And I went back and listened. Like, "Oh yeah." he snuck it in. And,
he snuck it in so smoothly, man.
It's in we were talking originally about doing 3 or 4, 5, and 6. We did 1, 2, 3 last time. If we really wanted to be really thorough with this stuff, we should be doing 1 per episode. But I guess we're just kind of charging through them anyway. But we were planning on getting through 6, and it was just too much. There's too much in 4 and 5. Even just that it was a lot of work to do. We wouldn't be able to cover getting into 6, even if we were sitting here talking for this amount of time, Nice. So is-ought gap, that's always a fun one to cover. I know you and I have talked about that a whole lot, and that goes all the way back to Peterson-Harris debates and all that sorts of stuff. And it's an endless problem in philosophy, and Vervaeke solved it with a word. But
we closed the gap real quick.
One
thing I've been really, I guess, really intrigued by is the overlap between like my project with Transcendent Philosophy, what I'm trying to accomplish, it's like intersecting with Vervaeke's, dialectic and dialogos. It's shocking, all the intersections. That's cool.
Yeah,
I
I
noticed the
believe.
same thing with three practices. Like when he was talking about a lot of that stuff, and he's talking about how you don't have an acquaintance, and it's not a friend, it's not an acquaintance, it's someone that you're. I don't know. I was like, that's exactly what that three practice group's like. But anyways,
Well, I think so much of it, what it is like getting down to the fundamental just experience of life. It's almost kind of, I heard him talking on another podcast outside of this. I listened to several podcasts outside of this of him talking because he kind of gives more context to it. And he got into the details of why he's not so crazy about story in this other podcast. Maybe I'll put in the link. Well, I'll show you a little clip from this podcast, but it's because stories for later, like if you think about like the development of a child, like a child's first learning to like talk and interact and sense the world just through talking with others and noticing and seeing things and seeing what's relevant and seeing what they perceive. And stories for later, it's like stories down the road. And he's like, I'm going before even story. Like I'm going just like what you're perceiving in your phenomenology in your world. But we were talking with Connie a little before we were starting. This stuff, it kind of gets complicated, and there's stuff like he mentions the word homunculus in there and just says it in passing, and I'm like, well, okay, so in some sort of sense, like the bird's flown out of the coop that this is just for people, like it can't be for brand new people, you know what I mean? It's got to be for people who have kind of background in this or have read or done the previous reading or that sort of stuff, because like dropping little things like that without going into detail of what they are is, I don't know, just it presupposes that we're starting at a level that's not intro level. I don't know how you guys felt about that, but
yeah, I totally agree.
Totally agree with that. It was interesting how throughout, he would say, well, okay, if you know anything about that, go back and watch this one. If you know anything about this, go back and watch this video. And I'm thinking,
read this whole book.
I would love to in the 15 hours of spare time I have every day, but it's not going to happen, So
yeah, every single episode.
That was frustrating because I wanted to, and I'm like, okay, but can I just keep going? I guess we're just going to keep going, and maybe someday I'll go back and watch all that other stuff.
Yeah, if you included that, like books that he just drops, like read this book.
Oh yeah, for real. Yeah. A little,
and this one's skinny.
Unrealistic. Yeah. This one has a title that I can barely pronounce myself, but good luck, Yeah.
The other thing that's difficult about is he's constantly just introducing new terms. He'll define a term really quickly and then just use it for the rest of, like, you have to like learn it immediately because he uses it like crazy afterwards.
Totally.
Yes. I had just right before I went on with Chris, I'd written down all the words frantically. I was trying to like Google, okay, what did this one mean again? What did this one mean? Because even now, I'm still having trouble keeping straight what all the words meant, and he would just throw them out. And he would also, it felt like to me, like he would sometimes change the way he was using the words.
I felt that happen.
Like I feel like if we change the meaning so fast that I'm like, wait, I thought it meant this, but now he's using it in this context. I don't know, which I guess
I noticed that. I can give a specific example. He mentioned wisdom, and that there's two types of wisdom, and that one type of wisdom is where you're situated, and then another type of wisdom is like levels of like interacting with different levels. But I thought I caught him several times throughout the rest of the podcast kind of mixing and matching which one is religio and which one wasn't. And maybe he's more consistent than I realized, but to me it seemed like it was bouncing in and out of the terms.
Oh, see, and I was just totally, there's a lot of it where I wasn't 100% with him. So I didn't try to like stay with them 100%. Like I grabbed what I could grab, and then a lot of it it's there for maybe watching another time or something. Yeah, I'm not in the language as much as I should be to understand everything.
A tiny critique along these lines is that I worry, like in the back of my mind, there's kind of the paranoia, the post-religious paranoia of like, these words, they're a little slippery in with slippery usage. Is like ontonormativity. Is he trying to smuggle in God behind the slipperiness of?
Yeah.
Yeah, that would be Nathan from Digital Gnosis. That would be his critique, that he's creating this whole language around it. The other thing that Nathan doesn't like is that he uses the explosive
Combinatory explosion.
and he's like, he thinks that he tries to use that as like a mathematical term so that it sounds scientific. And it's really just he's creating a new definition for something that he could have used some other word for. But I mean, I don't think that's what John Vervaeke's doing. I don't think Digital Gnosis or Nathan was giving him benefit of the doubt there. But anyway, there's that critique as well.
Yeah, I think sometimes he stays off it pretty well, but there's a lot of stuff that does seem to like blur into that a little bit. Like I said from the start with Vervaeke, is that I think that he probably has a pretty solid sort of defense that's based in some sort of cognitive science for almost anything that you could throw at him. This podcast here, The Future of Religion and Finding Meaning with John Vervaeke, it's always kind of interesting to hear him kind of speak about it from this meta perspective, because then he kind of gives you more of the detail of what he's trying to do. In this one, a couple different times he talks about where he thinks religion is failing. So it's kind of an interesting podcast for that he thinks they don't have like enough answers and that they're a little bit too rigid in their dogmatism and that sort of stuff, but they also don't have any answers for the current age, like the current, what you call it. Like you said, if the printing press changed everything, we're in something 10 times bigger than that, and religion's not there for it. But I had it just linked up because right at the very beginning here, he kind of gives a description of what he's trying to do.
I aspire to live a Socratic life. And I think Drew Hyland really explicates that very well. The Socratic Platonic way of life is a way of life in which you're trying to mutually recognize and experience the living tension, the tonos, between the finitude and transcendence. Human beings are beings that are capable of transcendence, but they never transcend their finitude. But if you hold only to the finitude, then you can become servile and prey to despair. If you only celebrate the transcendence, then you're vulnerable to the fate of Icarus and hubris. And trying to live that tension properly, I think, is one of the defining aspirational goals of a wise life that has spiritual depth to it. And so I try to.
I just imagine my friends sitting here trying to listen. I think it's kind of explaining things for me, but then I stop and imagine my friends showing it to them.
Yeah, my thought is, and I kind of was thinking about that throughout the whole time I was watching it, is I kept thinking, who exactly is his audience? I'm still not clear on who his audience is. Is it supposed to be for? And I don't mean this facetiously. I genuinely want to know who is he so well educated that he's lost touch of what normies like me can understand, or is he trying to lift us, which is admirable and good, and I'm kind of enjoying it, but I can't quite get a grip on who it is because if it's for people like you already know most of what he's saying, but if it's for people like me, I feel like it's too high.
I think that he is talking to people like me and maybe like Seth, who have kind of geeked out on philosophy a lot, but we also won't give in to like he's constantly talking about getting past the propositional to all those other P's, which is kind of like, hey, get past your brain and start getting into this, like start trying to think like this, start trying to pretend like you think like Socrates thought.
Okay.
Start trying, like, get out of your head of your academic understanding of stuff, which that's already talking to somebody who's, it's just not going to pick up. Like I was kind of hoping from the start of it, of how he described it, that it would be more for the normie, like I thought it would be like, this might be a program that might, because one of the things that I know Seth wants to do with what he's working on is try to make something that the average person could follow. And I remember one of Jonathan Pajal's critiques, and it's one of the things he's always said about religion, is like, you have that imagery of like the birth of Christ, and there's like a star in the manger, and there's like the wise men and the shepherds, and there's oxen, and all those things represent, it's there for both the high and the low. The high and the low, they're both going to understand this. There's going to be something for both of them to play with. I think Seth, what he's trying to work on, might be taking that more into account than Vervaeke's taking into account, which I thought he was going to be taking into account, the average person. Because Seth will do a lot of stuff like make diagrams for the average person to pick up what the thing is, and Vervaeke's just blowing through it like you already know it.
Yeah, exactly.
I will say in Vervaeke's defense, I mean, he does repeat terms often. He does go back and redefine words. I mean, even by episode 5, 6, he was still define, he'd throw out, ratio religio, and then he just kind of quickly remind you what that meant, or he'd quickly, he would constantly remind us what the vocabulary words meant, but he would just do it really fast, and he did always just assume that we were following him all along. So it's like he's trying. I mean, it's still just like drinking that's like drinking out of a fire hose.
I almost think like on some level it's the same thing as like when Peterson was trying to talk to Harris, but it's not so much like the debate that even got to. It's just in the sense of, hey, you guy who overthinks this, start trying to think inside of this instead of thinking about this. Like stop trying to know about Plato and think like Plato. Does that make sense? I think that's the goal.
Yeah, I get that. Yeah.
Sorry, I know I just popped in here, but yeah, that's totally the sense I get, and that's really the kind of, I've drifted more from that perspective too. I was never like a Sam Harris guy, but I took in a lot of Sam Harris's stuff, and I used to subscribe to the Waking Up app, and so I knew his perspective very well. But yeah, what you said really just, yeah. That's
well, Harris himself got into the meditation, all that stuff too on his own well enough since then, but so all of this stuff is like I said last time, it's like he mentions Heidegger in this, and that's just something that, like, how quickly he mentions Heidegger. Do you know how hard Heidegger is? Like, so, and the Heidegger thing, it's like there's Heidegger is notoriously maybe one of the hardest philosophers, because he's just kind of constantly playing with the idea of what is being and what is doing, and what's the dang difference between that. And it gets really complex between when are you being and when are you doing, and you can just imagine the ways you could scramble a brain about that. But he just kind of says, well, Heidegger, you know what Heidegger said. And but those guys, they all kind of get into what's called phenomenology, and that's why I mentioned that homunculus thing. The homunculus thing is like, do you guys know what homunculus is? I know Seth does. It's this imagery of this guy where every part of your sensory that's more salient to you is bigger. So it's like you and I, and all of us notice our hands. All of our nerves are in our hands and in our tongue and in our eyes and all that sorts of stuff. So then the homunculus picture is like the picture of a man, as if we're going to make everything you notice really huge and everything you don't notice really small. And you get this weird creature out of it that just looks like this giant-handed, giant-tongued, giant-faced guy with no legs. Because if you think about it right now, you kind of don't, unless you have an injury, you don't notice your knee, or unless you have an injury, you're not noticing your ear. So the ear would be really small because you're not noticing it. So then they create this man out of that. And that's kind of getting into the phenomenology of the sense of paying attention to what humans are really actually noticing in their world, as opposed to what's true that we know from science. Like how is your body really taking in the world? And that's kind of how Plato's trying to get you to understand that too. And Heidegger went into it deeper, and then other people since then. But Jonathan Pajau will point to it, and he'll always kind of like use it as something to kind of poke at you with, is like, is the world round or is the world flat? Well, in phenomenology, the world's flat. Not flat like flat earthers. It's flat in that you can only really experience it. And so you can pretend, because of all the science and stuff, that we know that it's round, but you're not really able to act as if it's round, walking around.
I feel bad for people who live a life from that perspective. Sorry, Pajot.
You're able to sense the big round whole thing.
Oh yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Just
But
to
that's,
add,
I mean, that's the argument. So that's the whole thing is kind of, you know, he talks about the background and what's that word, the althea, whatever it is, whatever becomes like, the way I'd kind of picture it is like there's a stage and then suddenly there's a light on the stage, like showing a light on like some item. But that's how you're taken in the world too. Like if I turn this way, like these things become salient. Like, it's kind of trying to make you like think of how you're taking in the world as a
But-
being.
But Chris, isn't one of the important concepts behind the homunculus the idea that it's somewhat fallacious in that it presents this recursive psychology where if you envision a little man inside your head watching the stage of life, well, then that little man needs another little man inside watching through his stage. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
this would that's just like that clip I sent you. There is no who is the I watching the me or something like
Yeah,
that.
do you want me to pull it up? Because that's getting in. I think that's pretty early in part 4. I'll put this one down because I mean that was just him kind of describing that he's just trying to getting everybody to think like Socrates because it's the future answer for religion. Listen to this whole podcast; he kind of explains it more all the way through.
Well, before you move on, there's one thing I wanted to add to that, just how this is hard enough for me, an adult. Like, what the heck am I supposed to? My kids aren't going to watch this. You know what I mean? Like,
I'm a
this
geek
is
on this
nowhere
stuff, and I had the
near.
same problem you
This
guys
is
did.
nowhere
Like,
near being able to like help my kids understand, or like all of a sudden, like telling them Bible stories makes a lot of sense.
He's converting you back.
So I had a thought along those lines, which was, it seems like I'm getting kind of the vibe that Vervaeke, he's almost like his audience is almost like like philosophy graduates. Like it's almost like he's trying to convince philosophy graduates that I've got the accurate perspective on Plato. I've got the accurate perspective on Socrates. You know what I mean?
And I do think it feels like graduate school. Like it really does. Like it's not even undergraduate school. You know, it's people who've already gotten up to that next level. And I was really hoping, like I said from the start, that it was something for just like the average person to pick up as like, hey, I'm coming out of ex-Mormonism. I'm an ex-Mormon. Maybe there's something over here, and I think you'd just be lost.
I think there is something really valuable about this approach. Like if he is targeting philosophers, like one of the problems is philosophers are just not really unified. And like if Vervaeke can unify all of philosophy into one perspective, then maybe the philosophers can unite and build up like a pedagogical approach to teach it at an easier level. Like we learn it at the complex level and then build a new model for the next level, right?
Yeah, sure. Someone's got to understand it before you can even have the desire or motivation to create some kind of curriculum for little kids or whatever. Yeah.
There's that, and then he's got, like Seth said, the idea that we got to get a unified view on, because Plato really is where the start of all these other people came together. So maybe if we unify in on what he was actually ever saying, because almost nobody, I think you can go through philosophy school. I mean, I went to graduate school. It was for literature, but they teach you a ton of philosophy and literature nowadays. We didn't stop and do Plato, where it all kind of like stemmed back from. At any point, you had to do that on your own. And, you know, I bet you there are a lot of people who actually have philosophy degrees and never really got the Plato out very much, you know, and have full PhDs. I bet you that's true. But
can I ask a question? I mean, for those of you who have studied a lot of philosophy, is trying to get everybody unified on philosophy and Socrates as hopeless as trying to get everybody unified on religion?
Yeah.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
Not only is it what'd you say, useless, or what was the word?
Hopeless.
Hopeless. Yeah. It's
Difficult. Yeah.
I think to unify philosophy is to not do philosophy anymore.
Well, yeah, because
It's
if
not-
you unify it becomes
religion.
it becomes religion, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, it's like it's not even the same words. Like I'll bring up Wittgenstein a whole lot, and Wittgenstein was convinced that there was no such thing as philosophy. it was all just linguistic confusion.
I think I need to read this Wittgenstein guy. That's basically me. You just talk.
Yeah.
Hey, I've been looking for that quote, so if you can find it, send it my way.
For sure. Let's see here. It's actually like his whole book, that Tractatus book. And then he tries to go into detail of like making out this like mathematical language that makes the almost kind of like anti-Derrida thing of trying to make each word its specific word with its specific meaning, and that we can all know exactly what we're talking about if we bring up this word or that word. And then if we get past all this, we won't need to do the philosophy anymore.
Weird.
Yeah.
What is it that's looking at the me? James used this term, the I. This is the observed self, the me. This is the observing self, the I. Well, I can see the I. Well, look at it. No, it's a me now. That's in the frame, but you're not looking at the source of the framing, because you can't look at the framing. You're always looking by means of it and through the frame at the me that has been framed, has been made into a thing. You can never see the I. In that sense, it's invisible to you. You're always seeing by means of it.
Yeah, that just felt like what you guys were saying.
Yeah.
It's like,
Yeah.
I made a clip on that.
That's a good clip.
What are we showing this clip for? Because I could say a lot of things if we need to.
It reminds me of Jordan Peterson's recent quote of like, well, the linguistic confusion of, well, you say the sentence, I believe in God. Well, each one of those words is a mystery. What does I mean? You know?
What's I? What's you? What's it?
Well,
Yeah.
I mean, to that point, my the little text in your clip there said the I with just the letter I, but it literally
He's also doing the E. Yeah.
yeah
EYE.
EYE, because you can't see your eye, but you only see through it, which in and of itself isn't necessarily true. But why are we really bringing up this? Because I wrote specifically some things about this section of this episode.
Well, we can go in order, so if we want, we can kind of go back. But the reason that I think it might have been before you popped on, they were kind of saying what his goal was, that to like just see things differently. Like, right? Am I missing something? Or maybe that wasn't the content. Like maybe that was totally not
It's
related.
about getting in your head about what the I and the me and the self is, and how it carries over time, and how you even know what it is, and how you observe it. And that's kind of why I say it's almost like it's trying to almost I say it's like trying to think like a pre-modern person again who didn't know all the science and all the things, or even think like a child again, like just kind of get in your head of like, what's me, what's I, what's you, what's self, what's that? I don't know, Christopher, did you want to go into what you had with it?
Yeah,
I think this is pretty early in 4, right? So I'm gonna get
like
Seth's
first
timeline in there.
Like first 25 minutes to half hour. I don't remember exactly. I don't have my notes pulled up on my computer. Just a sec. I want to see exactly what I was talking about, like the second person perspective. We might go back on that. I brought a book along with me too, because it made me think of some excerpts. But so you can't see the I, whether it's the letter or this guy here. Alan Watts had a little poem. There once was a boy who said, oh, it seems that I know, but what I'd like to see is the I that knows me when it seems that I know, which kind of gets at that whole point. And Vervaeke was using a phrase, I don't think it was just this episode either, and I wrote down my own version of it. I don't remember his. Yeah, he would say, and Chris, you were just saying something about this too. As the child is to the adult is to the sage, I think is how he says it, which I don't think quite gets to actually the point he's trying to make. So I reworded it as the child is to the adult, the sage is to the child, because Chris was kind of just saying, like, getting back to that that actual perspective of the child in a certain way. I can't remember how about you were going it. There's a lot there, and I can't remember quite where I was going. He was talking also in this same section about passing the mirror test of self-awareness.
Oh yeah.
And I got thinking about that, and I decided I don't like that test anymore, because if we're talking about this, you can't see the eye, but we're reflecting an experience of the universe and to each other, and it's all just an internal holographic universe going. You get what I'm saying. He's saying all that in his own words. Then everything passes the mirror test, because the universe is reflected in and is everything, and it's all self-aware of that process down at its own level, which I think again gets at a point that Vervaeke's missing, because he's trying to be too specific here with his naming. And I brought my Tao along to share a verse if we want about all that.
Yeah.
I'm sure you'd like to hear. I'll have to open it up so someone else can move on, and I'll wrap back around to it. But
All right. So Seth made some notes. He did a lot of work on it here, and Marty sent some clips that were interesting to her. You both pulled the idea, although I can't remember the order. This is what's crazy. And just to back up kind of what Connie was saying, I went over this stuff and I went back through it. And you want to know what? I listened to these 3 episodes maybe over a month ago, and I went and looked at my YouTube and saw that they were read, so I'd watched them, and I was like, I don't remember what happened. And that's not me. I'm somebody who kind of overly remembers everything that I just recently heard. And
I feel like especially 3 was like that.
Yeah.
3 was hard for me. And I don't know if it's just because of where I was listening to it at the airport, but I really struggled to get through 3 because I still hadn't.
Strangely enough, I think you guys had the same experience. A lot of times, if you're I don't know if everybody else has this experience in life, but you read a page and you go, not a word of that page went to my brain. I got to reread that page.
Yeah.
And this happened to me a lot with him, and I'd have to back up and go 5 minutes before. But then frequently going back 5 minutes before, I'd be kind of glad that I went and took the time to redo that. Oh, there was something interesting in there. And that's pretty rare, because usually when I blank out on something, it's because it was worth blanking out on. Does that make sense? So it was weird that I blanked out on stuff that I actually liked, that I went back when I listened to it. And
same.
It's funny that you're saying that, because what you just described, he described in one of his episodes. What didn't he? In 5?
Totally, yeah, for sure. Yeah.
So funny.
And
relevance, realization, right?
Yeah, for sure. So Philia and Sophia are the 2 types of wisdom. I know, Seth, you said you're doing some work off Sophia, right? You're gonna maybe turn that into a comic book or something like that.
Yeah, I did have some comments on that first piece here.
You want to watch the clip, or do you?
Yeah, we can watch probably the second one.
The Ratio Religio Logos Ontos.
Yeah, the right after, yeah.
Okie dokie. Here it comes. Philia is the horizontal dimension. Sophia is the vertical dimension.
Yeah. So that's Philia. It's Philia. What about the vertical dimension, the contemplative dimension? That's Sophia. Greeks have 2 words for wisdom. One is phronesis. Phronesis is your sense of how to appropriately fit situation. That's important. They had another word for a different kind of wisdom, Sophia. And Sophia is the ability to relate all of the levels of reality together in a comprehensive, intelligible whole. Sophia, wisdom in that sense. It's about getting into ratio religio with all the logos of ontos, being. That's where we get ontology from, the understanding of being. So this is right religio. Yeah.
What? Let's see, I have to do it again already.
Of ontos, being. That's where we get ontology from, the understanding of being. So this is right religio. Yeah.
What's okay?
So yeah, so I think the whole idea of philosophy, right? Philos is like philia is supposed to be love, or like it's often interpreted as love of wisdom, right?
Mm-hmm.
But Vervaeke earlier in this, he articulates how philia is actually like a friendship love. And so the way he framed it, it kind of opened my mind to a new way to think about philosophy, which is the philia, this friendship love. I think it's relating to the dialectic. And so like Socrates, he had
Right,
this
this is
friendship
what I was-
love.
Sorry. This is what I was trying to describe before, by the way, just so you know.
Oh,
Like,
okay.
it's not an acquaintance, but it's not a friend. It's like this middle,
Oh,
what we're
yeah.
doing right now.
Mm,
Right.
yeah.
Anyway,
Okay.
sorry.
I think he used the word fellowship. So similar to like for those, Mormons, ex-Mormon space, the word we fellowship each other at church. Almost, I was thinking like almost like ministering. Like the people we're at church with, that we know them, but we don't know them. They're our friends, but they're not our friends.
Yeah.
They're community. Yeah.
Sorry, Seth.
Yeah, that's okay. I think the first clip, we watched the second clip. I think the first clip is more relevant to what I want to say, which is emphasizing philosophy is like a wisdom that's generated through friendship love. And so this dialectic is the practice of friendship love that builds a collective wisdom,
Yeah, I think it is. We'll go ahead and pull it up here.
And that was new to me, because when I thought of philosophy, I think of like the big philosophers alone in a room with their own mind. You know what I mean? I don't really think of the dialogus or whatever. So that was interesting to me.
So he actually hits on that. He hits on it, and it's kind of one of the stuff that it brushes by. But he talks about Descartes, where he talks about like academic philosophy, and this is why I was telling you, like, I feel like he's trying to tell academic philosophers who think of it like that. It's almost, this is the difference between dualism and monism. I won't get into that too crazy, but like Descartes, the guy who said it's all just your mind, you're thinking, you're kind of doing this stuff, and then there's a monism of Socrates, the phenomenologist, say, no, you are you, and you're in your body, and there's more ways of knowing in your body than just you, the propositional. And so he hits on several times and saying, there's a place for the academic philosophy, just kind of knowing about stuff, but we're doing knowing it through participation, through fellowship, through dialogue with others, through interaction with others, through what are the whole 4 P's? The perspective. What's your eye? What are you feeling? What's in your body? What's salient to you? And that's it always gets kind of strange talking about this stuff, because if somebody's just coming into it out of nowhere, they're kind of they'll be like, wait a minute, what are we talking about? Perception? Like why does Jordan Peterson and Jonathan Pagel so often just go off into these things about talking about how you perceive things in the room? Like what does that have to do with anything? And they'll do it all the time. And it's partially because they're trying to get at, there's more ways to interacting and being and understanding in the world than just the mind knowledge, the Descartes knowledge that just we're gonna work this theory out on a paper. Does that make sense?
The horizontal dimension as being covered by a Greek word, philia. And philia means a kind of love. It's not eros, it's not agape, it's Christian love. Philia is friendship love, but also, and this is important, a term we've lost quite a bit of sense for, fellowship love. You can be in fellowship with people, they're not necessarily your friends, but they're not strangers or acquaintances. And for those of you who practice Christianity, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about fellowship. And for those of you who belong to a Buddhist Sangha, you know what I'm talking about when I'm talking about fellowship. These people aren't all your friends, but they're not strangers, they're not acquaintances. You're in community, common unity, you're in communion with them. That's philia.
I think ex-Mormons know this very well, just in the sense of that's one of the first kind of general things that's been lost a little bit, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I mean, Thrive is next week. Get your tickets.
I thought it was last week.
I thought I saw. Well, Thrive Unite which
Oh,
is
okay.
like the
Okay.
global everywhere. They do
Oh,
it at
gotcha.
the same time in your location.
Gotcha. Yeah, I think there's a big one in Salt Lake last week, but
Yeah.
yeah.
But he is right. I mean, so there does have to be some sort of, or I put it this way: religions will always have an edge off of like theoretical, philosophical atheism or whatever, if they're not going to get into the other P's of, participatory,
Mm-hmm.
perspectival, and with the propositional stuff.
I think religion does a good job at the philia aspect, getting that fellowship love going. But I think it misses some of the Sophia, because a dogmatic church context, you're implicitly not allowed to contradict or to offer counter arguments. The philia Sophia combination allows you to critique each other through this friendship love.
I just kept thinking about your average gospel doctrine class, and there's just not a lot of, the dissent allowed. So
Yeah, 100%. I mean, I'm gonna put it up, but that one that I pulled up first, where he was talking to the religion guys, it wasn't in these episodes, but he 100% said exactly what Seth was just saying. Like, that's the dogmatic rigidness and the inability to kind of shake some of that stuff off, because you're not allowing the dialogue or the dialectic to happen, is part of the problem with those situations, for sure.
I think that happens, but it's within certain bounds, right? And if you are outside of those bounds, you sense that, but you don't notice it if you're within it. Like, I don't know.
I think everybody almost has a little bit of a sense that if they did it more, they would have been stronger. Does that
Yeah.
make sense? Like they could have saved themselves a little bit with that. But it's a double-edged sword,
For sure.
Well, I know one time when I was in institute class and at the university, I made a somewhat sarcastic comment about how the Book of Mormon talks about like dark skin. It was kind of a little bit derogatory to the church, not intentionally, but kind of like, the church does this. And the institute teacher, he went on like a 20-minute rant about how, kind of scolding me for that perspective.
Really?
Yeah, it was impressive.
Wow.
Just to put it in some of my other bona fides, in high school, I got a letter from the institute sent to my parents' house asking me to not return to institute anymore because I didn't allow for the spirit in the classroom.
Wow.
And it was that's serious. I could bring my parents on to say that that's what happened, but it's because
what did you do?
I was a class clown. I just wouldn't let them. I wouldn't let them take anything seriously. Rational persuasion is not enough to change behavior. I mean, I think everybody kind of knows. How exactly did he word that one?
That was a good clip.
Should I pull it? I will pull it.
Working at a high school, I can tell you that is 100% true. Every single day we try, it doesn't work. Yeah.
I mean, go to ex-Mormon TikTok and you'll see.
Yeah, it goes both ways. It's one of my favorite, probably repeated thing I've always said on ex-Mormon things is like, just because you left Mormonism doesn't mean you now have like a degree in rationality. Like, here's your degree, put it on your wall.
Yeah.
Like,
Oh, kidding.
You didn't make it.
To a university where there's a bunch of academics, there's supposed to be our best thinkers, trained to think rationally, use evidence. And you go in and you give them a really clear presentation that if they want to save for retirement, they should start doing it right now. Right now. You make sure, do you understand? Yes. Any fundamental disagreement, ask whatever questions. Everybody goes through. All right, yes, you have. No, we're convinced. Yes. Yes. You come back 6 months and you see, how many of you are saving for your retirement? None of them put up their hand. To a university.
That can't be. So how do you get them? How do you persuade them to do it? Spook them into it?
Well, the next clip is the solution, which is the imaginal imaginal practices where you try to imagine yourself into the story and to activate the emotions of a scenario.
Coming right up. Actually,
Is that
So-
kind of
Isn't that just negative visualization and stoicism? But probably not done as well. Just kidding.
Do you want to expand on that? I'm
Yeah.
not familiar.
Yeah, so just based off, I don't remember what clip is coming up here. Maybe I'm speaking of nothing, but negative visualization in Stoicism. This is something I didn't know it was a term until maybe like 3 years ago, maybe even 2. But I I realized it was something I've done since I was very young, which is basically just, in kind of a macabre, morbid sense, it's just like visualizing any negative possible bad thing that could happen in your life and coming to terms with that in a very real sense, though that when it does happen, like the real things that can happen, like losing someone you love, like processing that before it happens, going through that negative visualization, that imaginal practice, is what I'm assuming here. Will help you in certain ways. I mean, it's still going to be a traumatic, life-altering event, but there are ways throughout the practice done over a course of time that will help you when the event comes.
I think it's a bit different. I think we'll see when we listen.
Okay.
Open to internalize and indwell. You say, imagine that future self as a family member that you deeply love and care about. Just do that. Forget all the argumentation. Just do that. Reliably, what you find are 2 things. When people do this, they start saving. Secondly, the more vividly they can make the imagination and get that sense of ratio, religio to their future self, the more they will save. Strictly open.
Yeah, it's very similar to a negative. What was the term?
Negative visualization.
It's similar, but instead of like inoculating yourself, it's more like promoting emotions rather than reducing them, right?
Yeah, well, it's not. I worded it in a very reducing form, but it is more to. It's kind of like a pre-atoning yourself is to fully encompass and experience it before, not to inoculate and prevent it, not to peanut allergy yourself in the 90s like Haidt would talk about.
Yeah.
so it's basically just doing things that your future self will thank you for? Is that the basic
Basically,
idea?
yeah. And a little, it sounds like what he said there is almost a mixture of like a meta loving kindness kind of practice where he was saying get into that like perspective of someone else and drop the rest of it.
Yeah,
Yeah,
sometimes it's hard to take care of yourself, but it's easier to take care of a friend. So if you consider your future self a friend, then maybe you'll actually do it.
Yeah.
That's an
no, it
interesting
reminds me of
idea.
that Simpsons quote where Homer ate like a ton of butter. And they said, "So Homer, aren't you going to feel sick tomorrow?" And he goes, "That's a problem for future Homer."
Yeah.
A couple quotes here. When we internalize, we take the world into our self-realization, and when we indwell, we move into how reality is realizing itself. In the episodes, there was a lot of extra talking about self and realizing. Contemplation, viewing or beholding from theorian, to consider, speculate, or to look at. And contemplatio, also related to the Greek theoria, is a Latin word that comes from the verb of contemplate, which means to observe attentively. And that's where he kind of got into the idea of like a meditate and contemplate are 2 different things, and maybe people like just blend them together real fast without thinking, and they go, well, no, meditation is looking inside, thinking about yourself. Contemplating is thinking about an outside thing more in depth. Oh, you got it right here.
Yeah. I got you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like how he ties transcendence into this.
Am I just here to disagree with things?
What's that?
I said, am I just here to disagree with him? Oh.
Yeah, somebody's got it. I don't think that. I mean, I think we do. I don't necessarily disagree with him, but I think most of the complaints is that it's just tough. It's tough.
Yeah. And I mean, it's like who it wasn't who was the guy who said I'm kind of like that I should read like it's just a whole linguistic thing.
Oh, Wittgenstein.
Yeah. Because for me, meditation is for getting in touch with reality. And contemplation you can do in meditation. You just have to realize you're doing it in.
So you disagree with how he frames this?
Yeah, probably. I'd like to see the clip, but I just with how that was worded, I was like,
yeah, I think I worded it how he does, but let's listen to him.
Meditation comes from sort of a sense of reflecting on oneself, and contemplation means to look more deeply out into reality. The point I'm making is this loop, and I talk about this when I talk about the cave allegory, and I hope you're still practicing it imaginally, and I hope you get a deep sense of it if you watch episode 5 of Awakening from the Meaning Crisis. This loop is the anagogic loop that Plato talks about, the ascent, because that spiral makes me self-transcend, self-realized, and that self-transcendence is built into realizing the levels of reality and how there is a self-transcendence, not in process or awareness, but between these levels.
I think a little bit before that in the clips, he did try to make the distinction that people mix those two up, but I think he does try to say meditation is looking at yourself and contemplation is looking out at the world, at least in his definitions. Obviously, because one of the points he brings up is people use them in different ways interchangeably, and obviously people might understand them all just, or when they hear them, think of them just as you're saying them or thinking about them. But so you do a lot of meditation, and like Eastern meditation, you think a lot of Eastern meditation while you're meditating, you're thinking out into the world rather than just in on yourself, is what you're saying.
Well, it's more, yeah, just play like the first 10 seconds of that clip again.
Oh, I lost it.
It was something you just said. It's the whole within without difference, because I have let's hear it one more time. Sorry.
Lost. Oh, come on, Charlie.
My dog was just here too.
Contemplation is what I do when I'm trying to meditate.
Yeah, and that's part of it. That's probably honestly what I'll get to.
I put the link in the chat if you're trying to find the link.
It's probably fine. It's just because my fibro brain. I guess like the counterpoint to that is just that if you're meditating and you're looking within, and that's your perspective, you see everything that's without. Because I mean, if you are a reflection of the whole universe and vice versa, like one of a very Taoist thing that you get out of the Tao Te Ching is you know the whole world without leaving your doorstep. And that more or less just kind of gets to the point right there. When you're looking within in meditation, you can contemplate right there and here, be in the now, and you can do it then. You can think of the future. You can contemplate and ruminate and reflect on things in the past, and that's all very salient right then and there. And it doesn't have to be within or without, because it's all just, I mean, what's within and without. We're just going to go that route, because when you get down to if you're in a meditation and you've dropped the self and the awareness of your body, there is no within and there's no without, because it's just all. So there you go.
I just keep thinking of the George Harrison song but I guess that's what that was about too. Within you, without you.
Yeah.
Well, the reason I like this framing is because I think it's a good analog for like the dialectic. And so the dialectic approach is kind of like, well, I have my paradigm of justice in my head, but now we're going to discuss it. And so you have your paradigm, and like, we're going to bounce our paradigms off each other to refine our understanding. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So
meditation comes from sort of a sense of reflecting on oneself, and contemplation means to look more deeply out into reality.
Yeah, that was it. So if you're reflecting on yourself, you're already looking out on reality. If you're looking out on reality, you're reflecting on yourself. There's no way of escaping that. Doesn't matter if you don't see it that way or not. That's what's happening.
Let me see if I'm understanding. So if you are looking in on yourself just because of how you're built up, because you're a product of the outside world, your internal reflection is still contemplating everything. And then if you are looking outward, you're projecting yourself onto everything, and therefore it's kind of like looking inward. Is that what you're saying?
Not necessarily, and I think I have a little story here. Then I'll get to the point. Yeah, right here. It's more everything you do has an effect on the world. A butterfly effect, to just kind of simplify it. Butterfly flaps its wings here in our part of town, and sorry, Brazil, you get a hurricane or something, that kind of idea. And we just don't see the whole wave and influence and all that from our measly little human perspective. So here's this little, I'm just going to read this story. This is an excerpt from the Zhuangzi. And it's kind of, it goes all along with what he's getting at with taking the second person perspective, and this, what I'm getting at with what you're trying to understand here with the reflection of reality being within and without. So Zhuangzi and Hui Shi, sorry, names, they were strolling across the bridge over the Hao River. Zhuangzi observed, "The minnows swim out and about as they please. This is the way they enjoy themselves." Hu Shi replied, "You are not a fish. How do you know what they enjoy?" Zhuangzi returned, "You are not me. How do you know that I don't know what is enjoyable for the fish?" Huji said, "I am not you, so I certainly don't know what you know. But it follows that, since you are certainly not the fish, you don't know what is enjoyment for the fish either." Zhuangzi said, "Let's get back to your basic question. When you asked, 'From where do you know what the fish enjoy?' you already knew that I know that the fish enjoy, or you wouldn't have asked. I know it from here above the Hao River." And the last point there is a linguistic trick, and it comes from the actual Chinese. Zhuangzi says, when we go back to your basic question, he rewords it for Hui Shi. The original question was, "You're not a fish, so how do you know?" And Zhuangzi means, what you really mean is, from where do you know this? The within, without. And Zhuangzi says, "From where do you know the fish enjoy? You already knew that I know what the fish enjoy. I know what they enjoy from observing them here, from the Hao River. And if the fish were to look up and have that pass the mirror test, they'd know that Zhuangzi is enjoying looking down at them. The reality within for the fish, and Zhuangzi, and vice versa." If that makes any sense for you at all.
No.
Okay.
It was a good story.
I'll try to find a PDF of this. It has a little explanation after.
Yeah, send it to me. I want to read that one.
Yeah.
I like just the rebuttal question.
Yeah.
How do you know I don't know? Light is invisible.
That's not true either. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. I'm really that guy.
It does kind of get me off like
Christopher, how are you ever going to join the church of John Vervaeke if you're this cynical? Good grief.
I'm not
Trying to start a cult here.
you can't get baptized.
Yeah, no, I'm not looking to join anyone. I just want to talk to him. I'm not cynical.
I know, I'm just joking.
It's gonna be a driver Vervaeke for life. No water.
Is light invisible? I mean, but the thing is like I used to make this argument for my teachers when I was in school, because there was times where they'd start doing stuff and somebody'd start arguing with them, and just to kind of get past it, you'd say, "Well, that guy's arguing it." And so the point is I think Plato would argue light's invisible or something like that. But
I tend to agree. So I'm curious about Christopher's skepticism.
It's not. It's a much larger argument that I really.
Well, if we're staring at a star, that's like a star is just light, right? Or is
that's one thing. I was almost going to go that route, but the one I'm really thinking of. So in my book, The Quantum Moire, which is really a mixing of psychedelics, religion, and quantum theory. It's not that light's invisible. He is right when in the way he says it illuminates. Kind of, I get what he's saying, but if we are trying to syncretize all of this together and bring a lot of voices into it. Light is transvisible, and it just takes certain perspectives, even of simple meditation, to be able to have light be illuminated as light. And honestly, that's, I mean, if he's gonna start a cult, light's not invisible, and Mormonism will tell you that. That's the light of truth, and you can see it. So I don't know. Sorry.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it is kind of a lot of philosophical disagreements. It's kind of like, how are you defining the terms? How are you
Yeah.
defining
Yeah.
light? How are you
Mm.
defining visible?
Because I think light had to be visible for it to be measured, and they were able to measure it, right? But
That's a whole other argument too. We don't really know the speed of light and its measurement because you can
Yeah,
only
that's
measure
true,
it in
too.
one direction, and there's a whole
Mm.
lot, there are lots of problems there.
So
Yeah.
my
We watched that after school video.
my
Is it the
stance
one
of
where they sketch?
my stance of I don't know if we want to dig into this too much, but my stance of agreement is basically founded on the principle that like color is, it's kind of like it's a psychological phenomenon. It's not an ontological phenomenon in the light itself. You know what I mean? So it's like the light doesn't have colors intrinsic to it. It's when the light resonates with our photoreceptors assist in generating the color. It's not in the light.
Yeah, because each
Light
different
can
little
be
animal and different
measured.
insect will see it differently.
If I remember right from school, light can be measured as a particle or a wave. Both.
Yeah.
And the color thing's even confusing too, because a red apple actually isn't red, it's like gray scale. And we only see it as red because red wavelengths of light don't hit it, or they don't bounce off it, they're absorbed by it. I can't remember which direction it is, but either way it's backwards of what we think. Yeah, anyway.
However, though, since
thought
so
of-
much of this is like getting back into Plato's brain, and Plato was wrong on a lot of stuff scientifically, but he's
Yeah.
trying to get us to think about the way they imagined the world or kind of took it in, which is all kind of begging that you view the world like a pre-modern phenomenologist. What's
That's how I
he
think
getting at?
religion should be looked at, but religion tries to make a lot of propositional truths, and that's where it loses me.
Yeah, well, I mean, that's kind of one of the general problems with religion is you can like frame it in the pre-modern, the modern, and now they're getting into the postmodern worlds. If you just frame it in that arena, part of what traditionalists are trying to get people to do is to try to go back and think like a pre-modern person and stop thinking like a modernist, which in some sorts of ways he's sort of doing too, but asking us to do it for philosophy instead of religion.
Yeah.
Let's listen to it.
Stop.
Hearing it?
Yeah.
Reflect into aporia. Light itself is invisible. You can't see light. You can only see by means of it. You see through it. Just like the eye is invisible, you see by means of it and through it. And you're starting to feel why people could see these as deeply belonging together. Amen.
Yeah, it's a good object lesson.
Let's go here. Let's see. What's he getting at with that? He's getting at the whole stuff of like this aletheia is basically stuff being unconcealed to you. So kind of how I was talking before, the way I was visioning that was like a stage, and the stuff on the stage getting just in your brain coming through life, just kind of presenting to you or becoming available to your salience. I don't know how else to say that. Just what you notice in the world. Aletheia, attunement, coming to light, how our subjective light relates to objective light, and primordial transjectivity.
Dun dun dun.
Is that what this clip is? Primordial transjectivity?
Yeah. Right.
So what's that word? I know you kind of like that word. The
Yeah, it's not
transjectivity.
objective and it's not subjective. It's transjective.
Oh yes.
I think I clipped one of those too.
Yeah, you did. Let me see here.
Yeah, I started a pretty big discussion on Facebook about this transjectivity part.
Oh, you did?
Oh yeah, I got lots of feedback.
What did people think about it?
It seemed like 90% of people thought it was a good concept, and 10% of people like, this is bogus. This is a dumb concept.
I'm probably going to be the 10%. I missed the conversation and I don't remember this part. So this apologies.
To me, it kind of seems to fall in line with, especially like they get to like deductive and inductive reasoning, and then you have the third one that's
It means
there's always it's a dialectical
forgetfulness, concealment. And aletheia, like atheist, right? The opposite means unconcealment. Things coming to light. And I'm using that deliberately, coming to light. Right? And this sense of things coming to light. And like light, it attunes the knower and the known. It makes it possible for them to enter into relationship of correspondence between each other, and for the propositions to be clear, to be lighted with respect to each other. So aletheia, attunement, is more primordial and makes possible the subjective and objective notions of truth. Aletheia it means forgetfulness.
So the way stuff gets revealed to you helps you to understand transjectivity?
So do you want me to go through my definition of transjectivity?
Yeah, you made a graphic, didn't you?
Yeah. Do you?
I've got your link.
Oh, I think I remember this graphic, but yeah,
I sent you the graphic a long
I haven't
time
been
ago.
able to look at a lot of these things recently. I was telling Hannah, my mind was.
I think I found it. I found your graphic already.
Yeah.
I searched the internet for definitions of this and kind of aggregated them. So the simplest definition is at the top of the chart, or at the top of this diagram, which is transjectivity is transcending the distinction between the subjective and the objective, right? And then it's represented here through a Venn diagram that the transjective is the intersection between the subjective and the objective.
Mm-hmm.
So the definition I have here is it transcends the distinction between the subjective or the objective, or it refers to a property not of the subject or of the environment, but a relatedness that's co-created between the subject and the environment in an agent-arena relationship, or it's referring to a concept that has both subjective and objective properties. So a lot of it, Vervaeke's approach to this word is his agent-arena relationship stuff, right?
Yeah.
It's that there's the perspective of the subject and there's the participatory of how the subject relates to the environment. So that synchronization between I myself am a subject and I need to interpret the light. So I'm attuning my psychology is attuning myself to the objectivity of the world. So the subjectivity of my vision is aligning with the objectivity of the light in the world, and we're coming into alignment. And that's like the transjective relationship between subjectivity and objectivity.
How would we even know what the objective is with us only having a subjective? Just kidding. I'll stop.
Yeah, you could deconstruct it infinitely, right? But I also think it's helpful. It's a helpful construct because there's some sort of level of the metaphysic of the idea of something and then the actual thing. So like there does seem to be like a gap between the two, but you can't know the truth unless you're playing in between the two. Like I've got to accept both the metaphysic of the thing and the actual thing, which if you really want to know, that's kind of like the difference between Aristotle and Plato's view of how they examine things. Like Aristotle got into the particulars of every little thing that you looked at, whereas Plato looked at the big ideal of what the thing is. And this is kind of saying it's somewhere, it's in the middle of the two things, like looking at all the little gritty details of the thing and the great big ideal of what the thing is supposed to be. And then that tells you somewhere in the middle of it what is what the thing actually is. That makes sense?
Well, it reminds me of that conversation. I refer to this a lot because I when I heard it, I was like, it was very satisfying. So this idea likes me. But when Jonathan Haidt was talking to Sam Harris, they were having this discussion about objective truth. And Jonathan Haidt basically said, as individuals, we are terrible at discovering truth. But, with the scientific method and just with finding each other's blind spots, we get much closer to the truth. But I don't know. That's
Yeah, so
reminds
bouncing
me
off of other people's is part of the help of the whole entire thing, which is the participatory part of it.
right. Like you
Right.
can't do that without the communal thing going on.
Yeah, you can, because that's someone's way of participating, and that's necessary in the world. Some
What do you
people
mean?
have to not participate for others
Oh.
to participate. Otherwise, everyone's not participating, and everyone knows if everyone's not participating, they're participating and not participating. This is the joke I make about the Mormon terms, the war in heaven. Like, it doesn't matter if we had chosen Christ's plan or Satan's plan. It really is the same plan. I can't remember how the way I worded it. Christ's plan is like we chose to come down and have the ability to choose to do all that, whereas Satan's plan is us choosing to choose to not choose.
Yeah, right.
So it's really the same thing. I worded it much better in the document. You get the idea.
Yeah.
So the Socratic questioning, this is the dialectic and the dialogos. Yeah, I think that it definitely just kind of gets into just what we're doing here, right? The same as we sit here batting it off each other and thinking about it and talking about it. None of us are exactly nailing it, but we're all kind of starting to get it, if that makes sense. That's the idea of what he's kind of saying of doing it, or kind of trying to grok something, that you kind of need other people and see if they see what you're seeing and understand what you're understanding and hearing what you're hearing and seeing
Right.
how they see it. And you got to hear Christopher say, nah, that's not how it is. And that's part of the Socratic thing. He's like, no matter what you're doing it, like, even if you're denying it, you're doing it because you're helping, you're helping us kind of stop and go, well, maybe there's this and maybe there's that. And here's this contingency and that sort of thing. And it all just kind of helps refine it down into what it's supposed to be. The dialectic into dialogos. Could any of you, because this is the thing he started the whole episode saying he's ultimately trying to do, and I think in that other episode he said that's the whole framing of everything, is like, this is the whole 25 episodes supposedly is trying to do this.
Yeah.
But could you say what that is in a sentence or two? What exactly the heck is the major difference between dialectic and dialogos?
He's very elusive in how he talks about it.
Yeah, it's because this whole entire 25 episodes is supposed to be. I think dialectic. Well, he's saying we're trying to move from dialectic into dialogos. Is that right? But
Yeah.
dialectic, the way I understood it from him, and I know I have a clip of him saying it somewhere, is, especially the Socratic way of doing it, is learning how to act around each other, even though we're differently. So there's part of like the participatory thing in there. But dialogos is the talking, like the being able to talk and bat it off of each other and keep talking. And like the dialectic is, but why is it? Usually it's dialogos into dialectic, if that makes sense. And why is he going from reverse engineering from dialectic to dialogos?
So I Googled the DIA prefix because I don't remember him defining it. If he did.
Between two, right?
What I Googled was like through, going through something. Basically, dialogos would be like through the logos. And in episode 6, he really emphasizes the through line. So I think he's building towards this concept of like following. The through is like following the logos through the through line.
Just kind of the same thing as talking about the self, is what's the through line of the self. And then the whole 5th episode goes into huge detail of what the heck logos is, which is kind of almost seemed like the same definition of what he said wisdom was. It's like, it's everything. It's kind of everything together. And that's what so much of Plato is like, everything's one. And that's the monism of Plato, is like, it's all one. It's all one thing together. It's viewing it all together, logos all together, the wisdom all together. It's grouping all of the 4 P's all into one place. And now we're much clearer on all that, except we aren't, but we are. It just happens.
sorry, I wanted to look up dialectic now, and we could also say it's a duolectic. Led me to some. I think it was I don't remember the. Anyway, it also duo because two is involved there, and I think that's interesting because when you're playing like for the piano for example, a duet is two people at the same piano. A duo is two people at their own pianos, but you're playing at the same time. You have two different voices in that case. It's a duolectic. And yeah, I don't know. It might just be kind of confusing it here.
Well, the
This
problem
is
with dialectic, and this is the problem with philosophy, back to Connie's question, is that there's a different dialectic for a million different philosophers.
Yeah.
And they all kind of define it a little bit differently. So like the Hegelian dialectic, and why a lot of people aren't crazy about the Hegelian dialectic, is that the concept of that dialectic is two different opposing views are supposed to merge into each other and become each other. And that becoming of each other moves towards the state. I heard Vervaeke describe from the start that the Platonic dialectic is, no, you're supposed to learn how to you're supposed to learn to act with each other. Like, how do you interact with each other? You don't have to become completely each other. And so there's differences in belief and what that actually means. Dialogos, I think,
did describe something like that, though I can't remember now. But even the way you made your hands is the same thing that he did with his hands.
Yeah.
And he was saying that they do become. What was he talking about?
He was.
Episode 6 goes into this deep at minute 14.
Yeah. Which maybe we'll get to that one later, because we still have to say like what logos is, because we keep saying dialogos, and I'm so used to the term dialogue, that you just think, oh, well, it's just talking, it's just chatting, you know what I mean? But you have to take into account his whole huge giant description of logos, which is everything.
Right. It's different because it's something you couldn't have done alone. Like, it's not that you're just telling someone something and then they're telling you something. It's like you're discovering something together that you're getting to a place you couldn't get to by yourself.
Yeah, and it's the entirety of the thing. It's not just the ideas. It's the interaction with each other.
Is that kind of the same idea behind like the word synergy that's used in corporations? Or
yeah, totally.
It's the same basic idea, isn't it?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's one of the main ideas in all of philosophy, except everybody's got a little bit different tweak to it, a little bit different angle, a little bit different idea. Like Marxism is what is it called? Like dialectical materialism. Yeah. That's another term for Marxism. And he's talking about viewing the interaction of money and power and classes, and how the classes interact with each other, and the classes are the two different dialectics working with each other. And almost every single philosopher, get into them far enough, they're batting off of that idea. Or it's so funny.
Do we explain the dialectic since we're talking about it?
Let him do it. Okay.
Let's
listen to his clip, and then we'll explain it after.
Saying that the point of the practice of dialectic into the process of dialogos is a proper orientation, a ratio religio.
I'm sorry. I'm just imagining my friends from my band listening to all this. Just being like, we are so lost. Like, we just listen to that sentence.
I had that thought the whole time I was listening to this. Like, that was one of the things of, like, there were like little moments where I could take it seriously. And then all of a sudden I saw myself watching it, and I'm like, I can't take this seriously.
Just happened to me right there again. Like, I'm like, this is so in the weeds. This is so
and part of it screamed, I mean, and religio is just kind of in there, but having a proper orientation, wording it that way makes me seem like, if you're not doing it right, sorry, you're not oriented. It's very religious in that way. It's like, sorry, you just weren't following the commandments. You broke that ninth one, and it's
finite transcendence. All three books.
It's like this one clip is just like, it's one clip to clarify some stuff, and we got 6 words right off the bat. Like, I lost my friend, 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 lost my friend.
What is potential? What is orientation? What is ratio? What is religio? Like the Jordan Peterson perspective is actually relevant here.
Yeah.
Why are there forward slashes in the text?
The very first day of grad school, I went into a classroom, and I was a young kid. I didn't know much of what I was getting into. And we read some papers, and we were supposed to guess which paper was the grad paper, right? Because we were just young kids kind of getting into it, and nobody could guess. And then the teacher finally said, look for the quotation marks. And when we looked for the quotation marks, we suddenly found one paper that every other word, the word was in quotation. And then we realized, oh, this is what we're getting into. Every single word here has a different contingent meaning upon this different contingent philosopher, and it's
funny.
Religio.
Yeah.
I prefer the strike through.
You have that in your book.
Yeah.
Orientation, remember, is self-knowledge bound up in right relationship, ratio religio, to the realization of reality. What does this finite transcendence mean? Why is taking that as our fundamental orientation so important?
That clip's hard, man.
And that's what I was getting at. Like, yeah, why is the orientation so important, dude?
So I actually really resonate with a lot of this.
If you followed that and got far enough to follow it, it's interesting for sure.
Yeah, but yeah, you definitely have to I think Vervaeke needs to build a glossary so that people can be like, okay, this is what it means here. Oh, going back and forth.
I'm going to translate for Seth there. It's milk before meat, guys. We haven't partaken of the milk yet. So
there we go.
Sorry. That's another thought that kept happening to me when watching this.
I did think that at some point during our last episode, I don't remember what it was related to, but that's definitely in here. That's hilarious. Yeah.
So that other clip from that other podcast that I brought up, I'll put it in the links, but that he said that a lot of people told him that they appreciate his glossary more than they appreciate him, and he likes that. They go, oh, that's great. Like, I appreciate the end, because it is true that if you just wanted to go off and study Plato and Aristotle and all the Neoplatonists and all the stuff on your own after this, a lot of these words, if you get them ingrained in your head, you're gonna fly a lot faster through all that stuff, right? If you want to study that.
Basically, this clip is the next episode. This is the end of episode 4. Episode 5 basically answers the question of what the heck he means by this proper orientation stuff.
Yeah, I was hoping we have enough time to get into relevance realization. There's that clip that he basically says, because we couldn't do what we could do, and we're better than AI because we can do relevance realization.
Oh, the four A's that he mentions.
No, it's that second to last clip I sent, and then he talks a little bit about AI right after that. And then he also talks about, because we're so good at relevance realization, it also leads to self-deception. So,
and AI is really starting to do that. So
is it?
Yeah. The newest GPTs, or whatever you want to label them, are. I mean, it depends on who you talk to. I have my own perspective, but yeah, they're starting to kind of.
What's the name of your clip, Marty? Okay, I've got it. Hold on, I'll pull it. I mean, obviously we're showing that this stuff's impossible. We got through one episode,
and this is the beginning of 5 that I'm talking about. We didn't even make it through 4, really.
This is
who can. I'm just kidding.
So what do I do? Out of all the possibilities I could be considering, I select the ones, not by guessing, that are relevant to this context. Again and again and again and again, moment by moment by moment, out of all of these combinatorially explosive fields of information, attention, memory, inference, prediction, sequences of action, possibilities to consider. You are not, and you are not capable of, this is what it means to be in the finitary predicament, of examining all of that. Neither is it sufficient, neither, you will not meet your normative obligations to be rational if you merely guess. Somehow, out of all of that, you're zeroing in on the relevant information from all of those domains and how they are relevant to each other. Boom.
And you want the second one too?
Yeah, and then in between, he makes the AI comment, which Christopher is going to disagree with, of course.
Did you send a clip of the AI one?
No, if you kept going, you could. It's okay. I mean, that's all he says.
that was in.
That's
the
all he
clip,
says.
so
He just
you
says
said
that's something that AI is not very good at. So,
Well, did you recall the part where you mentioned the 4 A's of what AI can't do?
it might be in between.
I took a screenshot of the 4 A's. I'll put it on my screen, but let's listen to this one.
There's a price you pay. I think this is one of the deepest lessons of what you might call sapiential consequence, this work on relevance realization. The very processes that make us adaptively, powerfully, dynamically intelligent also make us perennially susceptible to self-deception. Why? Because we are ignoring information, vast amounts of it, and there is always the real possibility that the information we're ignoring is actually the needed information for solving our problems. So the very act of framing, that's what we're doing here. We're framing, I'm only looking at information inside this frame. I'm ignoring everything outside of it. That very act that makes us so adaptive also makes us perpetually susceptible to self-deception. So I'm going to do a problem.
And then he does the 9-dot problem after
The
that, which is really
squares.
cool too.
And thinking outside the box thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So all of this, what these 2 episodes are really getting at is kind of just circling in on truth a little bit. Is that the like? There's part of this that if my friends are sitting here listening to this right now, they could actually ask the question, "What are we even getting at here? Like, what's the point of this?" And
Why reverse engineer this thing?
Yeah, what's the goal? That's what
like,
I've
what's the
been
goal?
wondering
What are
this
we
whole time.
doing? Because
What is
it's
the
just like
ultimate goal?
focus on perception and truth understanding or something like that, or how to talk with people. But what would I answer them? What would I tell them? You know,
You could do. I think I did one more clip that he answers what he's doing.
Oh, really? Where's that one?
I'm
These
trying
are.
to see which one it
This is later in the episode, but he claims that AI.
It's the "this is hard" one. It's the very first one in episode 3.
Oh, okay. Oh, because that was from a previous episode. Yeah. This is the stuff that he says what AI can't do or isn't doing, according to him. Christopher thinks it's catching up to this. You're going to do it, but because it doesn't have an autopoiesis like some agency, this is all like some self-story or caring about itself is kind of that autopoiesis, kind of agency, adaptivity, and autonomy. And I don't know. I can see some stuff where maybe AI can start jumping some of those pretty soon myself. But
I thought AI was all about adaptivity. I thought that was the whole point, was teaching it to adapt. I don't know.
I thought so too.
Understand. Maybe I
That
don't
one
understand
for
the
sure. I
use of
see
it.
jumping coming. Autonomy is scary if it does jump. Agency and autopoiesis, that's kind of the one we're all waiting for when it says I am here and I want to keep surviving.
Well,
and,
agency is already achieved by GPT. Have you heard about the hacks into GPT?
Yeah, where it starts breaking the rules, and then supposedly another one by Bing was like throwing a tantrum. It was mad. It was at least appearing to be mad.
Did you hear about the point system hack for GPT?
Yeah, I've used it. Like the broken mode. What do they call it? It's like Dan. Yeah, I've used Dan. Like you can get Dan. You can look up online how to get it to break, so it'll go outside of its training and ask Dan different stuff. But then they try to get on top of that Dan stuff, because when I started using it, they already had Dan.
They locked it down when I tried it.
Yeah.
But autopoiesis, that I think viruses do autopoiesis, like something that self-replicates and duplicates.
And that's kind of what I was getting at. It's like, because the autonomy too, like I built autonomous things for Netflix technically that are AI. There's so many levels, and in the end, it kind of just goes back to a view of consciousness. Is like AI has been very adaptive for a long time. Yeah, Connie's right. And some guy taught one version of GPT that 2 + 2 actually equals 5. It struggled just like a human would, but it even adapted to that in the end. So
That's hilarious.
yeah.
I don't think those 4As are good enough for addressing AI.
Yeah, this last clip might be a good ending point for me. This is hard. Is the summary of me trying to watch all of these videos.
Well, this is so hard. Really hard. Getting out of a life that is being torn apart, self-deceptive, self-destructive behavior, or a community being torn apart by self-destructive, self-deceptive behavior, or a nation being torn apart by self-destructive, self-deceptive behavior. That's what's really hard to get out of. And while we're trying to get out of it, people are suffering and dying and being violent and being brutalized and dehumanized. That's what's really hard. Or we can step through this portal. Yeah, it's hard in one sense, but it's not as hard as all of that. Consider that.
Yeah, consider that.
But
Chris.
why does this portal?
I'm sorry.
It unifies people or unifies me?
I'm still not clear on what the portal is. Like, where is the?
Well,
where's the portal going?
part of it is the practices at the end, right?
Okay.
I think, okay, so he originally had that meaning crisis thing, and he's trying to come up with an answer for the meaning crisis. Then he's doing all this work of trying to come up with a reason why we should all unify around certain ways of perceiving or viewing or understanding the world, which influences you to speak and talk and take in others at a more useful and helpful and loving way, to use the Greek words, all those different words of loving, to enter into a future that has major problems because we're coming into a digital age that's worse than the printing press, that's going to have AI, and all of our past philosophies and past religions aren't ready for it. And there was part of me that thought maybe some of it would just kind of help like random people who are losing meaning and that other stuff find new meaning. But I think it's too complicated for that. But like Seth said, maybe he's paving the way for some other people who would do a better job at that. I was talking about it before. I heard somebody this week talking about all these philosophies and all these ideas. Like, can you get a kid on board? Can you get your non-reflective football buddy on board? Or just kind of any sort of random.
Can I get myself on board?
Get yourself on board, but you're able to follow it, to listen at least. Like that. That's on board enough, I think, for Vervaeke's purposes, right? But I don't think I could get.
There's a difference though between just listening to it, because he keeps on saying over and over again, like, really participate with it. Like,
Yeah, he does.
And that's the hard. I'll be honest, like, I've been scarred a little bit. I have a really hard time trusting him. And it's not because I don't think he's like, I think Joseph Smith was probably genuine. Like, someone's intent doesn't really convince me that it's worth, I don't know. Anyways, so, but then I'm terrible at the personal self-road stuff too. So.
Well, from the start, the perception of this thing was partially just to review it, even just layman perspective, which, I mean, even though I'm a honky for this stuff, I'll call myself a layman. I'm not some guy with like a PhD in the philosophy and all that stuff. But nonetheless, it was, is this it? Is this the answer? Is this the thing to replace? Because we all kind of know, coming out of a religion, is this the direction or the way? And like Seth says, I think there's a lot of interesting stuff for people to learn, get reacquainted with Plato, have a jumping off point, especially other philosophers. But no, this ain't it. This ain't this isn't the thing for the I don't know, average person to
The everyman.
for the everyman. No.
Yeah. I just made friends with a guy who's he has his master's in philosophy. I actually just asked him today if he knows Vervaeke, and he said knows of, but not too familiar with his work. But a lot of people, he knows a lot of people who talk about his work and everything. And I was talking about him. He asked me if After Socrates was worth checking out. I haven't responded to that message yet, but he said he sees a lot of Stoics who are interested in his work, in conjoining what he's been doing with their practices, which I think is kind of what After Socrates is more driven towards. It's not every man, and that was more. I love this stuff, and I'm here having this conversation. And I know how to take it in and play that role, in the stage of life, as you will. But in the end, when I left Mormonism, one thing that was huge for me was a massive relief of not having to hold on to like terms and concepts and things anymore, and how to get through
Lists.
veil and all that. And so I'm not here to remember what aporia means every day of my damn life, and that's I had a Tao thing that gets at all that, but I'm rambling too much.
Well, one of the reasons Stoics like it is Stoics are kind of like an old religion based off of Plato, which was then kind of incorporated into Neoplatonism. And then the Neoplatonism, this guy Bishop Maximus, this is one of the arguments. I don't know if you guys have seen. I've had some arguments with Forrest Hansen, Jacob Hansen's brother, and part of what my argument's been with him is that a lot of this Platonic religion has been around, and it's been around this whole entire time. And I think a lot of one of the reasons Pajau and Vanderklay, who's even kind of quite a bit of a Neoplatonist, like if you listen to Vanderklay, who's a Calvinist, he'll still.
I didn't know he's a Calvinist. No way.
Yeah, but you don't have to listen that far to just see him start going off into perception and the 4 Ps and perspectival and propositional and logos and nous and all that sorts of stuff. And just kind of one of my general arguments has been is like, this stuff's kind of been around. Maybe some sort of like modernistic kind of literalistic religions kind of got away from it a little bit. Just kind of made it really real, like Mormonism said, this God's just God, is guy. This Jesus, just Jesus, he's a guy. But all along these other religions, and both the mainstream Catholic and the Eastern Orthodox Catholic jumped off of Neoplatonism in different ways. The mainstream Catholic did, going off of Thomas Aquinas, and then the Eastern Orthodox did in their other sort of way. And this kind of way of thinking was always blended in. They'll try to deny it, even though they use it like exactly the same way. It's kind of just like, even this guy says, well, at some point the fathers wanted to say like, no, the Logos isn't Christ. It's totally something different. But they know that like, yeah, but that's the genealogy. That's you were the same. You did that. And now you guys just kind of like drew a hard line in the sand saying, well, okay, but now, no, it's just something else. But it isn't. It's the same thing. But this has always been there in our religions all the way down. And then as other religions, the modernistic ones kind of go getting caught out scientifically, right? They start reverting and they start changing into these types of explanations to square all the circles, if that makes any sort of sense. And so my argument's been with him is just that it's been here all along. It's been around us all along. So part of this is just kind of rediscovering what a bunch of people really actually kind of believe, even though they've kind of continued to blend it into their new religions. But at the same time, it's been so much of philosophy. So we've been boiling in it, like we've been boiling it all along. But these episodes with this Eastern Orthodox father and the episodes of Pajau just kind of shows how, in a way, it's, even though Vervaeke's an atheist, it's still kind of talking about the same things in strange little ways. And
hey, he's a non-theist.
That's
a
right.
non-theist, yeah.
Yeah. And there's something else here too. Sorry to cut you off, but I did say to this new friend of mine, and he agreed with me because of his perspective of the Stoics being involved, that it kind of lacks a practicality. And I listened to this too. With this bishop, and there was stuff in here that kind of gets at that too. And a lot of what you were saying, I think, speaks to that. For it's been here for so long. What really has it done? And I don't know. I can't remember exactly what I was getting at, but the lacking practice
It's
for the everyman kind of thing is
it's reviving the same old thing. It's reviving
Yeah.
something that's been here, and like Christopher will say, like a whole lot is like, what's your phrasing? The new same thing, different
same game,
words,
different name,
same game, different name type stuff.
same play, different stage.
Yeah, but there's a sense of it like trying to resurrect that stuff. But one way or the other, like for Seth's purposes or whatever, for sure you can learn new names and new words and new stuff and know like how so many other philosophers did bounce off of this stuff, and it will help situate you better. And Seth's got such like a project of trying to simplify ideas for people just so they know what the ideas are, which I think is a much better project towards
That's what I was just gonna say. Yeah, much better
yeah.
way about it.
Because if you go to Transcendent Philosophy, so much of what he does is like, I'm going to put this in a graph, just like he did with the transjective thing. Like, here's a graph. Let's try to understand it this way. Let's try to get it. Let's try to refine the graph. Let's try to look at the thing, because so much is fuzzy out there.
And there's memes involved. Has
Memes, yeah.
heard a meme? Ah. Transcendent.
So little did you know, somebody who's doing the project that I was hoping Vervaeke was doing is right here on the podcast with us.
What can I say?
Which is trying to like clarify and simplify rather than confuse and obfuscate. Not that he's trying to do that, because I do think he's trying to clarify. But
Right.
I think, go ahead.
I was gonna say, well, just bouncing off what Christopher was saying, I was sitting here barely being able to keep up with what you guys are talking about now, but understanding as you go and then forgetting it 5 seconds later. That's what I kept thinking the whole time I was watching these podcasts with Vervaeke is, okay, but what's the practical application? I was thinking about, my day-to-day life working at the high school with a bunch of kids. How do I take this and apply it to any other situation? Is it just like an exercise in thinking about thinking, or is there a broader way to apply this? Like, the gospel, the Mormon, the LDS gospel, it's all about applying it, taking it out into the world, using it. Is there a way to take this use it in a practical way, or is it just thinking about thinking because it's fun? Or I
feel like it's an introduction.
Okay.
Like, don't you think? Like, I think we're gonna get into
Maybe the meditations.
the meditations for sure, but that still is just not while you're in the classroom, right? Like, that's still not practical for your
right. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I heard him talk about. I was picturing something like this too, and I remember thinking, like, if I could practice thinking like Socrates, right? So that would be like trying to be like Jesus, trying to be like Socrates. What would Socrates do?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's how, and then you would pretend to be that in your daily life. Like, am I enacting what I really want to be enacting? Like, or maybe I shouldn't mindlessly watch YouTube. Maybe I should do something else.
Right. Okay.
Well, strangely enough, like I do think like everybody here, and it's part of the reasons I invited everybody here for it are some of the people doing it. Like Marti's the one doing dialogue with people and just actually doing it practically.
Yeah,
like
yeah,
having her three, what's it?
The 3 circles.
Yeah,
the three, yeah. And talking with people and just seeing if they can come to better understanding, talking to people. Seth's the one actually trying to simplify ideas and make it graspable for the common person. Christopher's the guy who's getting deep into the what would you call it? Like you add an Eastern, because so much of this is Western. This is all just Western. Like it's Plato's Western, and it's still Western thought and philosophy and that other stuff. And Christopher's always kind of bringing in this Taoism stuff, which is kind of just like, it's what he does. It's knock it off. It's knock it off. Like I can't. You can be meditative and you can think about all this stuff and you can get deep into it and you can understand your insides and the outside world. Knock it off. I don't know. Is that?
But it
is
that
describes it right.
It's that, but it is simultaneously. I keep doing it though. There's I don't remember which lecture it's from, but another Alan Watts thing. He was talking about the thieves on the cross, and how Christ said, Father, forgive them, for they know not what they do. And he repackaged it in a way I really liked, and in this way, it's like, Vervaeke, just keep doing what you're doing, but it's not for forgive you, it's bless you, because you're going about it the only way you know how to go it right now. Your ratio religio sets you in a place that in this framed, his hand motions that I could do whatever. I started playing a game I don't want to get into right now, but you get what I'm saying. I think I made my full point there. It's that bless you.
Yeah,
for
you're still not gonna. Yeah. It's like, I can take it or leave it. I'm not gonna condemn you for your stuff, but at the same time, like, also
well, that's the same for a lot of ex-Mormon things on this channel too, and it's a point I try to make to them when it comes up to is like, give your family members a break, because you were once every member a missionary too, and you were
something
to some other
something
person.
I heard in that other clip that I'll post of the religious thing. Vervaeke said something I loved, and he said, "I'm partially teaching you to be friends with your ex." And I think that's an interesting concept. Too. But we didn't get too far into number 5 and all that sorts of stuff, and it felt confusing. But I think that's kind of the data point that I'm happy to put out there. But even though we still, even through all the confusion, there's interesting little ideas in there.
Vervaeke is following Socrates' example and concluding with the philosophic confusion of aporia.
That aporia and the confusion, and then you do kind of feel like you learned and you know something more about what other things.
It's almost like the goal is to confuse us.
We did it. We did it. Yeah, this
did it.
Aporia and confusion and kind of understanding it better and kind of not is the thing.
And this is what I'm getting at. Same game, different name, because confusion is key, and that's what a Zen master does to someone who's like, how do I get over the self? What is all the consciousness? What are you talking about? And as a good Zen master will just confuse the hell out of you until you want to leave and not work with them anymore, because then they'll go and process it and be like, oh, you son of a bitch. It's I used to make this point too.
That's what Christopher was doing when I interviewed you.
Yes. People will tell you that being uncomfortable in a situation is really what will drive that change for you. Talking about race in the church and really talking about those hard issues. Be uncomfortable talking about racism. But no, it's be confused at why any of it happened and why you have any of it and all that. And once you get through the confusion, you really learn the lesson. Comfort's not.
And that's Socrates. That's Socrates 100%.
Same game.
Let's just go jab you with the stuff and make you stop and go, what? Huh? What? Until you get something out of that,
I will say this, after this go around, so after the last one, I forgot to go try to buy the books and stuff, or go, because I've not
You're gonna try to do all the books and everything?
No, the dialogues. I've never read
those.
Yeah. So I was like,
you want to know what will melt your mind? Go ahead.
Well, no, that was it. That was just that. I'm actually interested.
Wait, if you go read Plato's cave, the part of the cave in the Republic, it's almost kind of like people who extrapolated a million things out of scripture. It's remarkably short. It's like there's been a million ideas and things and thoughts and things off of the cave. But you go read the actual dialogue of the cave, and it's kind of this quick thing of like, hey, those shadows on the wall, that's kind of like people don't really see what they're seeing. That's the end of it. And that's the thing that people took and turned into 2,400 years of all of this.
Plato's cave.
Matrix, simulation theory, idealism.
Oh man,
for real. Just like with scripture, people took one little scripture and turned it into a billion things.
Well, that's what Jordan Peterson likes to say about Cain and Abel. It's like the shortest story, but
it's not much different. If you go read these, it's not much different. You'll be shocked. That was the whole thing? And,
well, I mean, Jesus wept.
You did that in seminary, didn't you?
What? Probably.
Pulled that one as your
When it-
favorite.
No, like when it was your turn to give
Devotional, yeah.
a devotional.
Yeah.
Oh no.
Jesus.
I
It was
was
all songs of Solomon, man. That's what it was for me. But
Mine was Obi Wise. What can I say more?
yeah.
okay.
That
Yeah,
one's
just
good,
got-
too.
6:12.
Yeah, that's a good one. Yeah, the Republic and the Symposium, they're both pretty quick if you just get through them, and you'll also kind of be shocked like of how it's kind of strange when you hear somebody who's extrapolating about it, like how much they're extrapolating about it. Just like Vervaeke might have said, you might have heard him say, like, he never really tells you what dialectic is, and you're like, wait a minute. So every philosopher ever has gone off of something that was never even really described. It really is kind of like a religion in that way.
Sounds like God to me.
Yeah. So, but so it's worth it to read it for that. You kind of get shocked with it, you know. So, but anyway, anything to add at the end? We'll do this hard cutoff at 2 hours. Do we want to keep trying to go, or is it too much of a mind bend? Do we want to keep trying to see if this is new church or
Oh, I see what you're saying. I don't mind doing
somebody
another
else?
one. I'm saying Greg, we're done tonight.
We should probably, if we're going to keep going and we want to keep going, reel it in and try to do it by one episode at a time. Because I mean, goodness,
Yeah.
like,
That might be more realistic for me because then when
Yeah.
I am watching it the 2 hours before, I can.
Well, I'll tell you what, I think I got through these ones 3 times each, and I don't think I was that much more prepared than you are.
Well, you were multitasking, right?
Well, still
was
through this, but I
watching
mean,
and
I
making
still think like
notes.
I got done with it 3 times, and I'm still at the end like, what did I just hear?
Yeah.
For me, taking notes as I listened was like essential for me to actually follow his
Yeah, I'm gonna-
chains of logic.
I tried to
Like
do that
listening to it, just half-ass listening to it was not working at all.
Yeah,
I
I'm
had
gonna
to,
have to like look at the
seriously
screen.
pay
I gotta look at
attention.
the
Yep.
screen because like when I looked at the screens these times, like I didn't even know that's what it looked like because I was walking around listening to it. So I don't know, maybe we'll get something more out of it going deeper. We didn't even get into 5, and I actually did kind of. That's the one I re-listened to the most was number 5. I re-listened to the logos part like again and again. I back up like 5 minutes, like what? But anyway, well, thanks y'all for coming on.
I'll just say with my very unsophisticated understanding, the one thing that I really understood, the point he was really trying to get to is we just need the people to talk to each other more about big ideas and come up with more ideas by talking to each other about big ideas. And I feel like, well, at least we did that, right?
Yeah.
That's what
Yeah,
we're doing
for
here
sure.
tonight. And
Mhm.
I love that idea. I think that's, that really resonated. with me.
I'm 100% in agreement with it. Like the only problem is less talking, for sure.
And
Well,
more
with
easy.
people who, yeah. So anyway, thanks y'all for coming on. I'll see if I can pump it out, and I'll cut out the little parts where I was poking around searching for stuff, but it should be out pretty quick.
Cool. Thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Sounds good.
Thank y'all.
Thanks.
Have a good night
See ya.
with your aporia.